Good morning, I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche Organization with your daily video update for July 29th, 2025. What I'm going to be talking about today is what you might call the education of a president and the opportunity that the president has today for a profound shift in the strategic affairs of nations, moving away from the danger of extended war, World War III, nuclear war, to a sustainable peace. Yesterday, the United Nations opened a conference on a two-state solution for the Palestinian question. There were some very interesting speeches given about cooperation, cultural collaboration, and so on. This is occurring amidst a growing recognition, including in Israel, that the policy being adopted against the Palestinians is genocide. The question is there a will to act to stop it? A number of Israeli human rights organizations are speaking out. The taboo against referring to Israeli policy as genocide has now been broken by the human rights organizations in Israel, by a few politicians, and especially by Haaretz columnist Gideon Levy. The fact is that the overwhelming majority of the world's population already recognizes that Palestine must become an independent state. And that's part of the issue that's before the United Nations now, that recognizing the Palestinian state is long overdue. But merely recognizing it as a state doesn't solve the problem. There's an economic imperative. You cannot have a state which cannot take care of its population. And that's why Lyndon LaRouche drafted the Oasis plan, going back to 1975, to establish a basis for creation of fresh water, power sharing, industrial development, and so on. And there's a link in the description section today as to what the Oasis plan represents. But the potential now is that this could be linked up with the Belt and Road Initiative of China, with the BRICS nations, that you could actually have a real basis for peace through cooperation for economic development. This is the principle of Westphalia. And why this is important? Because there is a campaign that's been underway since 1999, directed by Tony Blair on behalf of the British Empire, to obliterate the tradition of Westphalia, the idea of cooperation based on mutual benefit. That's what Blair said is no longer acceptable. And instead, Blair's policy has merged with the neocon policy of a sole superpower dictating to the nations of the world what their economic policy should be. On the Blair question, I'll get to that in a moment, but one of Blair's key operatives, Jonathan Powell, is working in Syria with the former ISIS organization as part of a broader restructuring of nations in the Middle East. And that's what British geopolitics is about. The question is, what will the United States do? Rubio and the State Department put out a statement yesterday saying the U.S. will not support a two-state solution. So it falls now to President Trump. Now, Trump made some comments yesterday that were certainly useful. He said, there is real starvation stuff. I see it, and you can't fake that. We have to get those kids fed. Well, as far as that goes, it's fine, but who's the problem here? The videos and photos are there of emaciated skeletal children starving to death in the arms of their parents. And yet Netanyahu, who Trump is continuing to give backing to, Netanyahu said those photos are a fake. And then he said, let enough aid come in so that Israel won't be condemned. Well, what should happen is that Trump should cut off the aid to Netanyahu and instead commit the United States to a policy of development, cooperation, and incentives for cooperation, which is what the Oasis plan of LaRouche represents. That's the direction we have to go now. Now, what's the other problem when it comes to Donald Trump? Well, his coordination with Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, who's leading a group of Europeans to maintain a policy of confrontation with Russia. Now, the important thing about this is that President Trump should study the documents being released by his Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, documents which show that and prove there was a conspiracy against him precisely to prevent him from working with Russia during his first term to resolve the problems that we see now emerging and continuing with the war in Ukraine. That was the reason for Russiagate, to prevent a normalization of U.S.-Russian relations. And the documents provide a proof of a conspiracy against Trump. This was not just Obama. The media is focused on the Obama question. Well, we're going to be putting out a white paper which will document the role of the British in Russiagate, the elephant in the room, the evil hand of Blair, the role of people such as Hannigan of GCHQ and Sir Richard Dearlove of MI6. The British, as part of a British geopolitical doctrine that goes back to the end of the 19th century, are committed to maintaining hostility between the East and the West, to divide the world into competing blocs, as opposed to recognizing the principle of one humanity. And therefore, they're pushing for war now against Russia, against China, against Iran, and so on. Now, a step forward has occurred with the general recognition that there's genocide being committed against the Palestinians. The question is, who will stop it? And the person who that falls upon most immediately is President Trump, because the United States alone has been defending Israel's policy of occupation, apartheid, and genocide, blocking resolutions at the UN Security Council. But if that were to be shifted, what would happen if Trump came out and said, we must go back to the principle of Westphalia? Well, to do that, you're going to have to shut down London's channel of influence into the United States through the intelligence networks, especially the role of Chatham House, the Atlantic Council, the Anglo-American intelligence community, which has been in lockstep since the end of World War II, with a couple of exceptions. The big exceptions being the Suez situation, where Eisenhower told the British to stop the invasion of Egypt, and importantly, when John Kennedy intervened. So the idea of breaking the intelligence control from Britain, look at the Gabbard documents, and you'll see that while it hasn't yet come out, we're going to make sure it comes out that the wrong policy of the United States was made in London. That means you have to break with the think tanks. You have to break with the media and with the censorship and the hybrid warfare. The point is, the U.S. is the one power in the world that can act to revive the spirit of the Peace of Westphalia. It says that it's the commitment to cooperation for mutual benefit which provides the incentive for peace. President Trump, let that be your legacy, to have the United States become the champion of the principle of Westphalia. If you do this, you're not going to need a public relations campaign to win the Nobel Peace Prize. Remember, actions speak louder than words. There's a possibility now for peace. It includes working together with Russian President Putin, Xi Jinping of China, the BRICS countries. We recommend you get over to Beijing and meet with both Putin and Xi in the next weeks. This is the way to move the world from the precipice of World War III to an era of sustainable peace and development. And that would be based on restoring the principle of Westphalia. And to do that, you have to break with British geopolitics. That's the message from Helga Zepp-LaRouche and the Schiller Institute. It's a message which is important for you to take into consideration right now, President Trump.